is not strange and chilling enough. A pro-government Turkish newspaper is reporting that Khashoggi secretly recorded the events inside the consulate on his Apple Watch. And while private companies are bailing on a Saudi investment conference over this, not so far the Trump administration.
I am planning on going at this point. If more information comes out and changes, we could look at that, but I am planning on going.
Joining me now is Ayman Mohyeldin, NBC News foreign correspondent, and MSNBC host Trita Parsi, host, as well as Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian American Council, as well as Nayyera Haq, former State Department senior advisor in the Obama administration. And Ayman, I'm going to go to you first on this Turkish newspaper that is reporting that allegedly Mr. Khashoggi might have taped or might have, taped what happened to him on his Apple Watch. Do we know kind of who is this paper? What are their sort of leanings? Is this a reliable account? And could this be the recording that the Turks are talking about and not, let's say, a bug in the consulate?
So I think it's important to make the distinction here on a few different fronts. Since the beginning of this story and since these tragic events have begun, the Turkish government, as a matter of policy, has been deliberately disseminating information through the media. They are not providing, let's say, updates every day. They are not police investigation, press briefings, the type that we would normally see. So on one hand, this is a very orchestrated campaign by the government to increase the pressure, to let the world know the kind of information that they have by using friendly media outlets like this Turkish newspaper. And it's important to be clear that the Turkish government right now, for the most part, the media landscape inside the country is very supportive of the current president, Erdogan. There's a lot of criticism directed at Turkey for press freedom. But on this specific story, they have been using their sources to slowly roll out the information that they have with both Western media as well as local Turkish media. And so you should take everything that they are saying with a grain of salt, just for the simple fact that they are not providing definitive concrete evidence, let's say in the form of a press conference or official government press releases. Now, having said that, the way the information has been rolling out, the way it is being corroborated with other sources here in the West, does suggest, in fact, that the Turkish government has overwhelming evidence. Now, whether or not the recordings that they alluded to earlier are, in fact, recordings that were provided by Khashoggi's Apple Watch that was able to record and then ultimately upload these files to iCloud and then access somewhere else remotely, that in itself remains to be seen. We have not heard yet from Apple as a company whether or not they are involved in this investigation or had they been contacted to be a part of this investigation. So that in itself remains to be seen. I can assure you that people are working to try to find that part. But we also know from sources we've been speaking to directly that there's no doubt that the Saudi consulate in Istanbul was under surveillance, just as a matter of foreign espionage and activity that takes place. The Saudi consulate in Turkey is people would consider to be a high intelligence gathering facility. So I've spoken to Turkish security officials say that it is definitely possible that the Turkish government had recording devices inside the consulate, had sources and other informants working inside there. That is definitely something that is believable. But for their own purposes of how they gather that intelligence, the Turkish government may not necessarily be releasing that information so they don't compromise their methods and sources with other consulates and other diplomatic posts that they also may have under surveillance at this time, Joy.
Right. And Trita, the thing that is happening concurrently, I wonder how it dovetails. The release of this pastor, Brunson, who the Erdogan government had accused of being involved in this plot to overthrow Erdogan. And the other person, of course, that they claim was involved in this plot is a cleric named Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania. He lives here in the United States and was the subject of this supposed rendition plot that, remember Michael Flynn, we're bringing back names from the Mueller probe from way back. Michael Flynn, who used to be national security advisor to Donald Trump, was supposedly involved in a plot to rendition Fethullah Gulen and force him back to Turkey. The reason I ask you about that is that it appears, at least from the press reports, that part of what was happening to Mr. Khashoggi was an attempt to force him to go back to Saudi Arabia.
Yes. So what we're seeing here is, of course, this brutal, very tragic death of Jamal Khashoggi. But underneath the surface, there is this very, very intense and complex geopolitical game being played. The rules are not clear. The rules are changing. The behavior of many of the actors are changing. And we see very clearly that there is a complexity that the United States itself is involved in when it comes to Turkey, when it comes to what the Turks are doing with the Saudis. All of this is coming together in this specific case. And that is part of the reason, I think, why the Turks actually have not fully released all the information yet. They're also engaging in, bringing in Saudi forensic experts there. There is some form of a negotiation going on between the Saudis and the Turks right now, in which the Turks are trying to figure out what can we get out of the Saudis to help them one way or another make this go away. But clearly they're playing a very tough game there because they're not helping make this go away. On the contrary, they're really increasing the pressure on Saudi Arabia right now.
And there were sanctions that were imposed supposedly over the arrest of Mr. Brunson. Trump says that there's nothing like that. Not releasing those are not on the table. Nayyera Haq, well, normally in a situation like this was a U.S. resident. Mr. Khashoggi lived in the United States. He worked for the Washington Post. Normally you would see something out of the State Department. You would see some sort of formalized response. We have not seen that in this case. We've had ad hoc comments from the President of the United States. Let me play you one of those comments that comes from a 60 Minutes interview, a clip released early this morning. Take a listen.
Was he murdered by the Saudis, and did the prince give the order to kill him?
Well, nobody knows yet, but we'll probably be able to find out. It's being investigated. It's being looked at very, very strongly. We would be very upset and angry if that were the case. As of this moment, they deny it, and they deny it vehemently. Could it be them? Yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and there will be severe punishment.
Nayyera, the thing that I heard that's familiar is they deny it, which is what Donald Trump typically says about Vladimir Putin when it comes to election rigging. What do you make of that response from the president?
Well, our foreign policy is being run by a man who values close political and business ties over anything that has to do with real national security interests. So he has a business interest in Riyadh, the capital, and Jeddah, about his hotels, which predate him becoming president. Part of why he went there as his first trip. The Saudis realized very early on all they had to do was flatter him and court him. Again, this is a common theme of people that Trump decides to play nice with. And what they've gotten is a relationship between two crown princes, Mohammed bin Salman on the one side and Jared Kushner on the other. And Jared Kushner is the first person to take a phone call on this. And the Saudis, once this erupted in the media because of intrepid reporting, not because of any information coming from the White House, the Saudis insisted they would only speak with Jared Kushner. They would not talk to Pompeo. They would not talk to Nikki Haley. They talked to Jared Kushner. We did not, in the public, find out about that until several days later. And it is not standard practice for anybody in the administration to have high-level phone calls on hot-button crises issues and not have those read out to the press. So the fact that Jared Kushner is leading this shows that the Trump administration is far more concerned about maintaining its personal relationship with Saudi Arabia than it is about any national security interest for the United States.
To stay with you for just a second, Nayyera, you have Karen Attiah, who was Mr. Khashoggi's editor at the Washington Post, hopping mad. She's been tweeting up a storm ever since his disappearance. She tweeted, indeed, Jamal's apparent Saudi murderers have messed with the wrong paper and in me, the wrong editor. She also tweeted, I'm supposed to be resting, but I'm angry. Saudi money has corrupted so many people and organizations in Washington. I seriously wonder how many of these people, many of whom knew Khashoggi, are able to sleep at night. She's getting at the fact that the Saudis have really cozied up not just to governmental figures, but to business.
Oh, to business and to policymakers. I mean, there was a charm offensive to the tune of millions of dollars that the Saudi Crown Prince conducted last year. And they have unfortunately been able to turn many people to their cause and turn a blind eye to the blatant human rights violations. And we heard that from Donald Trump this week when he was talking about, well, we should be giving them $110 billion. Why not? And that goes to the heart of what is the problem of confronting Saudi extremism.
Yeah, Washington Post being much more proactive at this point than the White House in demanding answers in this gentleman's murder. Eamon and Trita will be back in our next hour. We're going to talk a lot more about those business interests. Nayyera Haq, thank you very much.